The stars were quiet when the UNSC Resolve dropped out of faster-than-light travel above New. Captain Park stood at the bridge window and felt his stomach turn cold. Below him, the colony world should have been glowing with city lights. Instead, there was only darkness and the orange flicker of fires that had been burning for days. "No response on any channel," said Lieutenant from her station. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly over the controls. "I have been trying for 10 minutes. Nothing." Was 43 years old. He had served in the fleet for 20 years. He had seen pirates, he had seen accidents, he had seen the aftermath of natural disasters. But something about the silence from New made his blood feel like ice water. "Take us down," he ordered. "Landing team ready in 5 minutes." The ship descended through clouds of smoke. As they got closer, the damage became clearer. Buildings that had stood for generations were now broken shells. The spaceport was a field of twisted metal, and everywhere, there was the terrible stillness of a place where people had lived and now did not. Doctor met at the landing ramp. She was the ship's medical officer, a small woman with gentle eyes who had joined the fleet to help people. Now those gentle eyes were hard with worry. "I am reading very few life signs," she said quietly. "Captain, this colony had 80,000 people." They walked through the ruins of what had been a beautiful city. New had been founded by Korean settlers 150 years ago. They had built schools and parks and temples. They had raised families here for 5 generations. Now the schools were burned. The parks were covered in ash. The temples had fallen. Found the first survivor near what remained of the central hospital. It was an old woman, sitting alone in the rubble, covered in dust and dried blood. She was not crying. She was not moving. She was just sitting there, staring at nothing. Rushed to her side. "Grandmother, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" The old woman turned her head slowly. Her eyes focused on his face, and something like recognition appeared there. "You came," she whispered. "You finally came." Her name was. She was 78 years old. She had been a teacher at the elementary school for 40 years before she retired. She had been visiting her when the attack happened. They brought her to the ship and gave her water and medicine. For a long time she could not speak. She just held onto his hand and trembled. But eventually the words came out, and when they did, wished they had not. "They came from the sky," grandmother said. "Big ships shaped like insects. We thought it was a mistake at first. We thought maybe they were lost or needed help. We sent welcome messages. We always send welcome messages." She stopped and took a shaky breath. They did not want welcome. They wanted the children. Felt something crack inside his chest. The children. Only the children. They ignored the adults completely. When parents tried to stop them, they just pushed them aside. They were not interested in killing us. They were only interested in taking the little ones. Grandmother's voice broke. "My grandson, my little Minu, he is only 7 years old. He was holding my hand when they took him. They just pulled him away from me like he was nothing." She began to cry then, deep, terrible sobs that shook her whole body. Stepped closer to, her face was pale. "Captain, I have been analyzing the weapon signatures and ship residue. These markings match the Dominion. They knew them by reputation, and species ancient and powerful. They had been part of the Galactic Council for thousands of years. They were known for their arrogance, their military strength, and their complete lack of interest in younger species like humanity. But they had never attacked anyone directly. They had never needed to. Everyone was too afraid of them." "How many children?" asked. He was surprised by how calm his voice sounded when everything inside him was screaming. Checked her data pad. The numbers made her go white. Based on colony records and current survivor count, approximately 2,000 children between ages 4 and 12 are missing. "Captain, they took 2,000 children." 2,000. 2,000 small faces. 2,000 little hands reaching for parents who could not save them. 2,000 voices crying out in fear as alien creatures carried them away to unknown horrors. Walked to the communication station. His legs felt numb. His whole body felt numb, but his mind was very, very clear. Open a channel to Earth, he said. Priority 1, all encryption. This message goes to the United Human Council directly. It took several hours for the full scope of the disaster to become clear. The Resolve's crew worked through the night, searching for survivors, collecting evidence, documenting everything. They found more people alive than expected, hidden in basements and caves, but they did not find a single child, not one. The adults who survived told the same story again and again. They had come with purpose. They had scanners that detected young humans. They had moved through the colony systematically, building by building, taking every child they found. It was not random violence. It was not war. It was a harvest. When the response came from Earth, it was not from military command. It was not from any single government. It was from the United Human Council, a body that had not issued a unified statement in over 50 years. The message was short. It was simple, and it changed everything. Find them, bring them home, whatever it takes. Read the message 3 times. Then he read it to his crew. Then he broadcast it to every survivor on New. In the ruins of the elementary school, someone had spray-painted a message on a wall that still stood. It said, "They took our bobbies." Under those words, a child's drawing of a family was still visible, somehow untouched by the fire. A mother, a father, 2 children, all holding hands under a yellow sun. Stood before that wall for a long time. He thought about his own daughter back on Earth, safe and unaware. He thought about the 2,000 children who were not safe. He thought about what kind of creatures would do this and why. Then he returned to his ship and began sending messages to every human vessel in the sector. The hunt was beginning, and somewhere in his heart, in a place he did not usually visit, something ancient woke up. It was the thing that made humans dangerous. Not their weapons, not their ships, not their technology. It was the simple fact that you do not touch their children, ever, no matter who you are, no matter how powerful you think you are. You do not touch human children and expect to survive. They were about to learn this lesson, and they were going to learn it in the hardest way possible. The Galactic Council chambers on Harmony Prime were the most impressive structure in known space. Built over 3,000 years ago, they floated in the void between stars, a monument to cooperation between species. The Great Hall could hold 10,000 beings. Today, it was completely full. Ambassador Lee Myra walked down the central aisle toward the speaking platform. She was a small woman dressed simply in black, her hair pulled back from her face. Around her, representatives from 47 alien species watched with curiosity, concern, and in some cases, barely hidden amusement. Humans were still considered the new arrivals, young, inexperienced, emotional. Behind her walked Admiral Shin. He was 60 years old, tall and thin, with gray hair cut very short. He had not spoken a single word since boarding the transport. He had not needed to. His presence alone said everything necessary. The council speaker, an ancient being from a species that had no name humans could pronounce, called for silence. The representative from the human collective may now address the council regarding the incident at the colony designated New. Myra reached the platform and looked out at the assembled aliens. So many different shapes, sizes, colors, so many different ways of thinking and living. And yet, looking at them now, she saw only one thing: cowardice waiting to happen. 17 days ago, she began, her voice steady and clear, the Dominion attacked our colony world of New. They killed 4,000 of our people. They destroyed our homes, our schools, our hospitals, and they took 2,000 of our children. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Myra continued, "I have evidence. Weapons signatures, ship identification codes, recorded transmissions, biological samples. The evidence is complete and undeniable. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of aggression against humanity. She pressed a control on the platform, and holographic images appeared above her. Photos of the destruction, videos from security systems that had survived. And then, worst of all, a transmission intercepted during the attack, showing soldiers loading crying children into transport pods. The chamber went very quiet. From the upper levels, a deep voice spoke. It belonged to High Sovereign Prime, leader of the Dominion. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, with a hard shell body and 4 arms that ended in sharp points. He looked down at Myra like she was an insect. "The human speaks truth," he said. The translation device made his voice cold and flat. "We did these things. We do not deny it." More murmurs. Several alien ambassadors exchanged shocked looks. Open admission of aggression in the council chambers was almost unheard of. Myra forced herself to remain calm. "Then you admit to an act of war against humanity." "War?" Prime made a sound that might have been laughter. "Little human, we do not make war with you. You are not important enough for war. We simply took what we needed." "What you needed," Myra repeated. 2,000 children. "Your young have remarkable neural plasticity. Their brain tissue adapts in ways that adult tissue cannot. Our scientists have developed a process to use this tissue to enhance our soldiers. It requires fresh subjects. Human children were simply the most convenient source." The words hung in the air like poison. Myra gripped the platform edge so hard her knuckles went white. Around her, she could hear the reactions of other species. Some were horrified. Others were merely uncomfortable. A few seemed completely indifferent. "You are using our children as raw materials," she said. "You are experimenting on them. You are killing them." "We are improving them," Prime corrected. "They become part of something greater. They should be honored." For a long moment, Myra did not respond. She looked down at the platform, at her hands, at the diplomatic credentials she had worn proudly for 15 years. Then, very slowly, she removed those credentials and set them down. "We did not come here for permission," she said. "We did not come here to beg or negotiate. We came here to inform this council of what is about to happen." Admiral Shin stepped forward. His eyes were fixed on the leader, and there was no emotion in his face at all. That was what made it terrifying. Not anger, not hatred, just cold, absolute certainty. "High Sovereign," he said, and his quiet voice somehow filled the entire chamber. "You have 72 hours to return every human child to our custody, alive and unharmed. If even one child is missing, if even one child has been hurt, there will be no further discussion. There will be no treaty. There will be no surrender accepted. We will end your species." The chamber erupted. Dozens of aliens shouted at once. The council speaker called for order. Prime leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering with what might have been amusement. "You threaten the Dominion, you, a species that has barely left its birth world. We have crushed empires that existed before your ancestors crawled out of the ocean. We have weapons you cannot imagine. We have." 72 hours, Shin repeated. Then he turned and walked away. Myra followed him. Behind them, the chaos continued. Several friendly ambassadors tried to stop them, to urge caution, to suggest alternatives. Myra ignored them all. In the transport back to the human fleet, she finally allowed herself to shake. "Do you think they will return the children?" Shin looked out the window at the stars. "No." "Then we are really going to do this. We are going to war with the most powerful military force in the galaxy." "Yes." Myra closed her eyes. She thought about the holographic images she had shown. The crying children, the burning buildings, the parents who had been unable to save their own sons and daughters. "Good," she said. What the Galactic Council did not know, what they could not have guessed, was what had been happening in human space during those 17 days. As soon as word of the attack spread, something unprecedented occurred. Every faction, every nation, Every colony that had ever argued or competed or fought with each other simply stopped. Factories that had not produced weapons in 100 years began making them again. Scientists abandoned their research to work on military projects. Retired soldiers contacted their old units and asked what they could do. Criminal organizations offered their ships, their networks, their money. Religious leaders of every faith issued statements of unity. Parents across 1,000 worlds held their children close and waited. And the fleet moved. While Myra and Shin stood in the council chambers, while Prime laughed at human weakness, every warship humanity possessed was traveling toward space. Not some of them, not most of them, all of them. Cargo ships were being converted, mining vessels were being armed, even pleasure craft were being with whatever weapons could be found. The council received this information just as Myra's transport docked with the flagship. An aide rushed to the speaker with a data tablet, trembling. "Honored speaker," the aide whispered, "our sensors show human ships gathering at the border. We count over 10,000 vessels." The speaker looked at the number again, certain there was a mistake. "That cannot be correct. Our records show humans have fewer than 2,000 military ships." "These are not all military ships, honored speaker. These are everything. They have brought everything they have." Across the chamber, Prime received his own report. For the first time, a tiny flicker of something like concern crossed his ancient face. He had expected protests. He had expected threats. He had expected the humans to complain and then accept their loss, as so many other species had done before. He had not expected this quiet, total, absolute response. But it was already too late. They had taken human children, and in doing so they had made the worst mistake any species in the galaxy could make. They had awakened something in humanity that usually slept, something protective, something relentless, something that would not stop until every child was home or every was gone. The 72 hours began to count down, and across the cold void of space, 10,000 human ships waited in silence for the answer they already knew was coming. The returned 200 children on the second day. Doctor was waiting when the transport arrived. She was a child psychologist, 51 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. She had volunteered immediately when she heard about the rescue mission. Now she stood in the medical bay of the flagship and watched the doors open. The children came out slowly. They were thin. They were dirty. They moved like small ghosts, their eyes empty of everything except fear. Some of them had bandages. Some of them had scars that were still healing. One little girl, no more than 5 years old, had marks on her head where something had been attached. Knelt down to their level. She did not ask questions. She did not demand anything. She simply opened her arms and the children came to her. They clung to her like drowning people clinging to a rock, and they wept without sound. That night she learned the truth. They had not returned these children out of mercy. They had returned them because they were unsuitable. Their neural tissue had not responded properly to the experiments. They were rejects, garbage. 200 children out of 2,000. The rest were still in hands, and according to the message that accompanied the transport, they would remain there forever. They were now property of the Dominion. Read the message once. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, over 1,800 children were still suffering, still being used, still waiting for someone to save them. "I am sorry," she whispered to them. "I am so sorry we were not faster, but we are coming. I promise you we are coming." On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Shin received the news in silence. His staff waited for orders. They waited for the explosion of anger, the demands for immediate attack. But Shin simply nodded and turned to his communication officer. "Open a channel to all human frequencies," he said. "Broadcast the following message." He spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather, but his words spread through human space like fire. "They have refused our terms. They have returned only those children they considered worthless. The rest they intend to keep. This is their final answer. A pause. 70 hours from now, Operation Homecoming begins. Every ship, every soldier, every resource we have will be committed to this mission. We will not stop until every child is recovered. We will not accept surrender. We will not negotiate. The Dominion chose this path. They will walk it to its end. Another pause. To the listening to this transmission, look at your world tonight. Look at your children if you have them. Remember what you see. You will not see it again. The channel closed. Across human space, the reaction was instant. This was not anger. Anger burns hot and fast and then dies. This was something else entirely. This was cold. This was patient. This was eternal. Sergeant Han was on a transport heading to the staging area when the message played. He was 32 years old, a special forces operative who had spent his career doing the jobs no one else could do. He had a daughter of his own, 7 years old, with her mother's smile and his stubbornness. When he closed his eyes, he could see her face. His team was some of the best soldiers humanity had ever produced. They had trained for years. They had performed missions that officially never happened, but none of them had ever faced anything like this. New orders, said to his team. We are not part of the main fleet. We have a different job. His second in command, a woman named, looked up from her weapon. The children. The children. Intelligence has located a facility on one of the outer moons. We believe the remaining children are being held there. Our job is to get them out while the fleet keeps them busy. How many guards? Unknown, probably hundreds, maybe thousands. Nodded slowly. And our extraction plan once we have the children. We have transport waiting in a nearby system. If we can get the children to the landing zone, we can get them out. If looked at his team. 7 soldiers against an unknown enemy force, trying to rescue 1,800 children from the most secure facility they had. The odds were not good. The odds were terrible, but not a single person in that transport hesitated for even a second. We will get them out, said, all of them, whatever it takes. Meanwhile, Pilot Officer was running her squadron through final preparations. She was 26 years old, the youngest squadron leader in the fleet, with more confirmed kills than pilots twice her age. Her was Ghost, because she had a habit of appearing where enemies least expected her. Her squadron was 40 pilots, good pilots, brave pilots, but she knew the numbers they were facing. They had thousands of fighters, centuries of experience, and technology that humanity barely understood. She gathered her pilots in the briefing room. They looked at her with trust and fear and determination all mixed together. I am not going to lie to you, she said. Many of us will not come back from this. They are strong, they are fast, they have every advantage except one. She paused and looked at each face in turn. We are fighting for our children, not for territory, not for resources, not for pride, for our children. That is why we will win, because we cannot afford to lose. The Galactic Council made one final attempt to stop what was coming. They sent a delegation to the human flagship, begging for more time, more negotiation, more chances for peace. Ambassador Lee Myra met them in the diplomatic chamber. We have calculated the likely outcome of this conflict, the lead delegate said. She was from a species that had been spacefaring when humans were still living in caves. Humanity will suffer catastrophic losses, possibly extinction-level casualties. They are simply too powerful. Myra listened politely, then she shook her head. You do not understand, she said. You think this is about winning or losing. It is not. Those children are ours. They belong to us. They are crying for their parents right now, wondering why no one is coming to save them. We will not let them wonder forever. We will come for them even if it costs us everything. But the risk. There is no risk we will not take. There is no price we will not pay. There is no force in this galaxy that will stop us from bringing our children home. Myra stood up, signaling the meeting was over. You should leave now. What happens next is not something you want to witness. The delegates left. The countdown continued, and in the silence of space, 10,000 human ships began their final approach to the border. Loaded his equipment, checked her fighter one more time, held the children who had been returned and promised them that their friends would be saved. Shin stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the clock tick down. 72 hours had passed. They had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. At exactly 72 hours and 1 minute, every human ship crossed the border simultaneously. The darkness of space lit up with engine fire as the largest military operation in human history began. Operation Homecoming was here. And somewhere on a cold moon orbiting a distant world, 1,800 children felt the universe shake and wondered, for the first time in weeks, if maybe someone was finally coming to save them. They were right. They had expected a war. They had prepared for battles, for strategies, for the slow grinding process of military conquest that had served them for. They had studied human tactics, analyzed human weapons, and planned accordingly. They had not prepared for what actually came. Human ships did not fight like any enemy they had ever faced. They did not stop to secure territory. They did not pause to negotiate after victories. They did not accept surrender from military installations. They simply moved forward, destroying everything in their path, like a wave that could not be turned back. Admiral Shin stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the tactical display. Blue dots representing human ships spread across space like a disease. Red dots representing defenses disappeared one by one. 3 shipyards destroyed in the outer systems, his tactical officer reported. 4 more under attack. Their defense fleet is trying to regroup at their third moon. Do not let them regroup, Shin said. Press the attack. Give them no time to think. The commanders were confused. This was not how wars were fought. There were rules, traditions, ways things were done. You took ground, consolidated, negotiated, took more ground. You did not simply burn everything you touched. But humanity was not fighting a war. Humanity was delivering punishment, and punishment did not follow rules. Led her squadron through a field of debris that had once been an orbital station. Her pilots were tired. They had been fighting for 36 hours with only short breaks. 3 of her pilots were already gone, their ships nothing but expanding clouds of metal and fire. Ghost Squadron, new target acquired, her targeting system announced. Carrier Group bearing 275. Looked at the display. The carrier group was massive. Hundreds of fighters surrounded a central ship nearly 3 kilometers long. It was exactly the kind of target that should have made her turn and run. All pilots follow my lead, she said. We hit the carrier's engines. Without engines, it cannot run. Without running, it dies. Ghost lead, that is a suicide run, one of her pilots said. Their fighter screen is too thick. Then we make it thinner. Today we are all already dead. The only question is whether we take them with us. She pushed her throttle forward. Behind her, her squadron followed. They were not following because of orders. They were following because somewhere in space, children were waiting, and pilots were buying them time with their lives. The battle was brutal, quick, deadly. When it was over, the carrier was a burning wreck and had lost 17 more pilots. Half her squadron gone, but the path was clear. She did not celebrate, she did not mourn. There was no time. She simply turned toward the next target and flew on. On the surface of the outer moon, Sergeant Han and his team moved through darkness. They had landed 3 hours ago in a stolen transport, their signatures masked, their weapons ready. Now they were deep inside enemy territory, getting closer to the facility with every step. Contact ahead, whispered. Patrol 6 guards. Made a hand signal. His team spread out, silent as shadows. The guards never knew what hit them. One moment they were walking their route. The next moment they were gone, and 7 human soldiers were moving past their bodies. The facility was enormous. It had been built into the moon itself, tunnels and chambers carved out of rock over centuries. Its intelligence said the children were in the central complex, held in pods while scientists conducted their experiments. "We have a problem," one of his team members said. "Look." Looked. Between them and the central complex was an open area, well lit, heavily patrolled. At least 100 guards were visible, probably more he could not see. "Any other way in?" "None that do not take us hours out of our way. The fleet cannot keep the busy forever. We need to move now." Thought for exactly 3 seconds. Then he made his decision. "We go through, fast and hard. You and Park take the right side. Create a distraction. The rest of us will push through the center while they are confused." "That is not much of a plan." "It is the plan we have. On my mark." They moved. What happened next was later described in military reports as unprecedented close-quarters engagement. What it actually was could not be captured in reports. It was desperation and skill and fury all mixed together. It was 7 humans against 100, and the died. Took a wound to his arm. One of his team members, a young woman named Bay, took a shot to the leg. They kept moving. They did not stop. They could not stop, not when they were so close. The door to the central complex was sealed. Heavy metal, electronic locks, designed to withstand anything. Placed his charges, fire in the hole. The explosion tore the door apart, and behind it saw something that made his heart stop. Rows upon rows of pods stretching into the distance. Each pod held a child. Human children floating in some kind of liquid, tubes connected to their small bodies. Some of them were awake, their eyes open but empty. Others appeared to be sleeping. They were so small, so helpless. "Get them out," said. His voice cracked for the first time in years. "Get them all out now." His team worked frantically, opening pods, disconnecting children carefully, wrapping them in thermal blankets. Some of the children cried. Some did not respond at all, but they were alive. They were alive. "Incoming," shouted. More guards were coming, a lot more. Could hear them in the tunnels, their legs clicking against stone, their weapons charging. "How many children do we have?" 800, maybe more. There is no time to count." "Get them to the extraction point. I will hold the door." "That is an order. Get the children out, all of them. I will catch up." He knew he would not catch up. His team knew it too. But they did not argue. They gathered the children and began moving toward the surface while took position at the broken door, his weapon raised, ready to buy them every second he could. The first wave came around the corner, opened fire. He thought about his daughter as he fought. He thought about her smile, her laugh, the way she called him when she was tired. He thought about how he would probably never see her again. But these children would see their parents. These children would go home. That was enough. That was worth everything. He did not know how long he held that position. Minutes felt like hours. His ammunition ran low. His wounds bled. But he did not move. He did not retreat. He stood in that doorway like a wall and would not let a single pass. And then suddenly there was silence. The stopped coming, looked up confused and saw something impossible. Human soldiers, dozens of them, pouring into the complex from another entrance. "Sergeant Han," one of them called. "We received your distress signal. The fleet is winning. They are falling back everywhere. We came to help with the extraction." Tried to respond, but his legs gave out. Strong hands caught him before he hit the ground. "The children," he whispered, "are they?" "Safe, Sergeant. Your team got them to the transport. They are safe." Closed his eyes. He thought about his daughter again. Maybe he would see her after all. "Good," he said. "That is good." Above the moon, human ships finished destroying the last of the defenses. And across every human frequency, A simple message was broadcast. We have them all. The war was not over, but the mission was complete. 1,800 children were going home. And they were about to learn what happened next. 1 year later, the Galactic Council chambers were full once again. But this time, the silence was not caused by curiosity or concern. This time, the silence was pure fear. Ambassador Lee Myra walked down the central aisle just as she had done before. She wore the same simple black clothes. Her hair was pulled back the same way. But something was different now. There was steel in her eyes that had not been there before. And behind her walked not just Admiral Shin, but a dozen human officers, their faces hard as stone. The section of the chamber was empty. It would always be empty now. 1 year ago, Operation Homecoming had rescued every surviving human child from captivity. 1,812 children had come home. Some were healthy. Some would need years of treatment and therapy. All of them were alive. And then the punishment had begun. The Galactic Council had begged humanity to stop. They had offered to mediate. They had promised compensation, territory, anything. Humanity had refused everything. There was nothing to negotiate. There was nothing to discuss. They had touched human children. They had to pay. It took 8 months. 8 months of systematic destruction. Human ships did not target civilians. They did not attack cities or homes. They targeted only military installations, research facilities, weapons factories, and shipyards. Everything that had made the powerful was burned to ash. By the end, the Dominion no longer existed. Their fleet was scrap metal. Their technology was gone. There was intact but stripped of all advanced equipment. The survivors were scattered across the galaxy in small refugee groups, forbidden from reuniting, forbidden from rebuilding, forbidden from ever becoming a threat again. This was not conquest. Humanity took nothing. No territory, no resources, no slaves. This was simply the end of a species that had made an unforgivable mistake. Now Myra stood at the speaking platform and looked out at the assembled aliens. Some species met her eyes. Most looked away. 1 year ago, she began, I stood here and presented evidence of what they did to our colony. Many of you urged us to show restraint. Many of you warned us that we could not win against such a powerful enemy. Many of you offered to negotiate on our behalf. She paused. We did not need your negotiation. We did not need your help. We did not need your permission. We needed our children back, and we got them back. Admiral Shin stepped forward. His voice was quiet as always, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. They believed they were untouchable. They believed their power made them safe. They believed that younger species like humanity would accept whatever they did because we were too afraid to fight back. He looked around the chamber, meeting every pair of eyes, every sensor cluster, every perceptive organ that the various alien species possessed. They were wrong, and now they are gone. Myra continued, We did not come here today to threaten you. We did not come here to brag about our victory. We came here to make something very clear so that what happened to the never has to happen to anyone else. She pressed a control and a holographic image appeared above her. It was not a weapon or a fleet or a symbol of war. It was simply a photograph of children playing in a park on New. The colony had been rebuilt. The children were laughing. This is what we want, Myra said. This is all we have ever wanted, peace, prosperity, our children safe and happy. We do not seek conquest. We do not want your worlds or your resources. We are builders, explorers, dreamers. We want to be your friends. She let that sink in for a moment. But understand this clearly. Every species in this galaxy has something they hold sacred, something they will protect at any cost. For us, that something is our children. They are not soldiers. They are not resources. They are not bargaining chips. They are everything. Her voice grew harder. They learned what happens when you threaten what we love. They learned that humanity will accept any cost, make any sacrifice, cross any line to protect our young. They learned that our kindness is not weakness. They learned that our patience is not endless. They learned that behind our smiles and our handshakes and our trade agreements, there is something old and fierce and absolutely unstoppable. She looked directly at the species she knew were most likely to cause trouble in the future. The ones who had empires, the ones who had weapons, the ones who thought that power gave them the right to do whatever they wanted. What happened to them was not revenge. It was not cruelty. It was simply a promise kept. And now I am making another promise to every species in this chamber. Myra's voice filled the hall. Live in peace with us and you will have no better friend. We will trade with you. We will learn from you. We will share our knowledge and our resources and our future. We will be partners and allies and companions among the stars. A pause. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. But harm our children and you will share this fate. It does not matter how powerful you are. It does not matter how many ships you have or how advanced your technology is. If you hurt human children, we will end you. Not because we want to, but because we have to, because that is what parents do. The chamber was completely silent. Admiral Shin spoke one more time. His words were simple. They were not a threat. They were just the truth. We are not monsters. We are parents. On Nu, the memorial stood in the center of the rebuilt colony. 2,000 names carved into black stone, one for each child who had been taken. Beneath the names, a simple inscription, "Never again." Captain Park had retired after the war. He lived near the memorial now, helping with reconstruction, watching the colony come back to life. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix, but he was at peace. The children were home. The nightmare was over. Grandmother still taught at the elementary school. Her grandson Minu sat in her classroom every day, learning to read and write, slowly healing from what had been done to him. Some days were hard. Some days he woke up screaming and could not stop, but he was getting better. They were all getting better. Doctor oversaw the largest therapeutic program in human history. 1,800 children needed help learning to live normal lives again. It would take years. It would take decades, but had years and decades to give. Sergeant Han had survived his wounds. He had received medals he did not want and praise he did not need. The only thing he cared about was the message he received 3 months after the rescue. A short video, sent from Nu, a little boy who looked about 7 years old, holding a sign that said thank you. The boy was smiling. Watched that video every night before he went to sleep. It reminded him why he had fought, why they had all fought, why it had been worth everything. On the anniversary of the attack, the entire colony gathered at the memorial. Every survivor, every rescue worker, every soldier who could make the journey. They did not come to celebrate victory. They came to remember what had been lost and promise it would never be lost again. Grandmother stood before the crowd, holding Minu's hand. The little boy looked up at her and asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Grandmother, are we safe now?" The old woman smiled. She thought about everything that had happened, the horror and the pain and the terrible year of war. But she also thought about what came after. The galaxy knew now. Everyone knew. Human children were the most protected beings in the universe. She squeezed her grandson's hand and gave him the only answer that mattered. "Yes, little one, we are safe. The whole galaxy knows now. They will never forget." Above them, the stars shone in the night sky. Somewhere out there, dozens of species were looking at humanity differently than they had before. Some with fear, some with respect, some with both. But none of them, not a single one, would ever again make the mistake they had made. Because humans had shown them something that could not be unseen. Behind all their technology, their art, their science, their kindness, there was a simple truth that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues and wars, and every other disaster the universe could throw at them. You do not touch human children, ever. and anyone foolish enough to forget that lesson would learn it the same way they had learned it. The hard way. The final way. The only way that mattered.